20 years ago, one of the most iconic superheroes in the world returned to the silver screen after an 8-year hiatus. Batman Begins would become a huge success overnight, as well as paving the way for comic book media as we know it now. So in today's video, I want to talk about the impact of Christopher Nolan's first chapter in the Dark Knight trilogy and how it has affected comic book movies even to this day, and why it's such an underrated classic. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome to another That's Joe video. My name's Joe and that's about it, but that's not about it. It has been 20 years since the release of Batman Begins to the day, and I was 10 years old when I first saw this film, and that's just crazy to think. I'm 30 now and I was 10, and what the hell, man? It's a film I would consider the big bang of comic book movies as we know them now, and I'm such a huge fan of it, and it's influenced my life and my love for Batman and the DC universe overall. You can see from my collection and everything, I've got so much Dark Knight trilogy stuff, but it all started with one film in 2005, and that was Batman Begins. Warner Brothers had lost faith in Batman after 1997's critically slammed film Batman and Robin, starring George Clooney as the Caped Crusader.
Hi, Freeze. I'm Batman.
The reaction to the film wasn't the best, being widely criticised as campy, over-the-top tone, poor script, and lackluster character development. But to be honest, that wasn't the case for me. You know, 3-year-old Joe loved it. He loved that Batman. That was the Batman I remember. And to be honest, I go back and watch that film and I still get loads of happiness from it. And well, the toys did help. But years passed and then a little film comes out called Spider-Man. Directed by Sam Raimi and starring Tobey Maguire as the iconic web crawler, it became a huge hit with audiences and made a ton of money for Sony. But in the basement of Warner Brothers, they had to start taking notice of this huge hit. And with a sequel already greenlit, it was time for Warner Brothers to take action and bring back The Dark Knight. But how? Well, to approach it more seriously, obviously. Christopher Nolan, an upcoming director, was hired to bring Batman back to the silver screen, along with his writing partner David S. Goyer, who had already had experience in the comic book movie space with Blade and Blade 2, which took a more realistic tone, but with a lot of fantasy elements injected in. The screenplay for the film was so closely guarded that executives at Warner Brothers would have to read it with Nolan present. And whilst developing the movie at script stage, concept art and models for the film were being assembled in Chris Nolan's garage, in order to give visual reference to what he intended the film to look and feel like. But perhaps one of the most shocking developments of this period was that the Batmobile was going to be a tank. This clay model, moulded by Nolan, would become one of the most iconic vehicles in movie history and would stir up some controversy when revealed before the film's release. Even Nolan said it looks off this world, it looked very alien, and granted he was right, because during the filming of Batman Begins, when they were taking the Tumbler, as it's known, out into the streets of Chicago, which was the backdrop for Gotham City, a drunk man attacked the Batmobile thinking it was an alien spacecraft. I mean, that's just crazy. Warner Brothers already knew that this version of Batman would be very different from what came before. More grounded, more dramatic, more serious. But one of the biggest differences from previous incarnations was this was an origin story, taking elements from some of Batman's most iconic stories and molding them into one. The big question Nolan had on his mind when developing the film was, what if Batman was real? What makes a guy dress as a big bat and take on the criminals of Gotham City? Like, what is the grounded reason for that? And I guess I'll let Mr. Nolan explain himself.
The original inspiration behind the Dark Knight trilogy, and particularly Batman Begins, it was about taking this beloved character and recontextualizing the character, setting this extraordinary figure in an ordinary world, or a seemingly ordinary world. And so for me, it was much more about creating a recognizably real scenario that the extraordinary figure of Batman could exist in. Our idea was that it felt that he would need to view this as a character he's created, or a symbol he's created, to try and inspire the people of Gotham, and that there would be an end game to that he would have an effect on the world and then be able to stop. And so we became very interested in seeing how that story would play out.
Auditions took place for the part of Batman, with actors Cillian Murphy, Ian Bailey and Christian Bale entering the final round of auditions, suited up in none other than George Clooney's Batsuit. Nolan enjoyed everyone's take on this iconic character and their interpretation of the duality of Bruce Wayne and Batman, something Nolan wanted to get right for the film to work. But Christian Bale's intimidating and growly voice when suited up was the clear winner.
I'm Batman.
Christian Bale was cast as Batman and production began on the film in March 2004.
Hollywood Boulevard, the black carpet world premiere, Batman Begins. This is the Batman movie I've waited for my whole life. Check out these stars.
Over a year later, on June 16th, 2005, Batman Begins was released, and oh boy, it changed everything. With a more mature and realistic tone, it showed everyone that a superhero movie could be critically acclaimed and commercially successful with a serious tone. Grossing over $300 million worldwide against a mere $150 million budget, Batman Begins was a success. The critics loved it, the fans loved it, and Warner Brothers knew they had something special on their hands and immediately greenlit a sequel with Nolan and the main cast returning. But we're not here to talk about The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. What was so special about Batman Begins was how it revitalized the franchise, but how it also had a major effect on comic book movies in the DC and Marvel universe going forward. The film's success led to a wave of darker, grittier superhero adaptations and influenced how Hollywood approached the genre. Kevin Feige, Marvel Studios president, who went on to create the biggest cinematic universe in history, even considered this film as the influence for the MCU's first chapter, Iron Man, saying in a 2012 interview, "Chris Nolan's Batman is the greatest thing that happened because it bolstered everything." But the year is now 2025, 20 years since the film's release. Does Christopher Nolan's first entry in his highly regarded trilogy have an impact on comic book movies today? Well, yeah, it does. Batman Begins was a turning point. It was the moment Hollywood started taking superheroes seriously, not just creatively, but commercially. Since then, superhero films have become major drivers of box office success, and that shift can largely be traced back to Nolan's influence with Batman Begins. If Batman Begins had not been made back in 2005, I have no idea where comic book movies would be right now. Maybe there is a universe where everything would have been like Batman and Robin. Can you imagine? Maybe audiences would still see them as children-only films. And granted, another comic book movie could have come along and taken Nolan's approach eventually. I have to be honest, the tone established in Batman Begins didn't necessarily work as the blueprint for every superhero movie that followed. A great example of this is Man of Steel. While I still consider it one of the best comic book movies out there, it veers away from the core of its source material. Instead of portraying Superman as a symbol of hope, it paints him more a dangerous and conflicted figure. The Amazing Spider-Man is another case, a story that would have embraced the fun and excitement of a teenager grappling with newfound powers, instead leans into a darker, more brooding mystery about Peter's past. The thing with Batman is that he's a very dark character. Like, he is completely human, 100% human, and psychologically he's not all there, so the sort of darker, grittier template works for that character and that world of Gotham City. But when you start injecting Batmanness, if you want to call it, into other comic book movie properties like Spider-Man, like Superman, which are more colourful and vibrant, it doesn't quite work, I think, personally anyway. That said, the cinematic tone Nolan introduced in Batman Begins is clearly echoed in both of these films, grounded, serious, and emotionally heavy. And yeah, I don't think it all worked in those two films, but in other comic book movie films, it definitely works. Fortunately, it seems like comic book movies from both DC and Marvel are beginning to shift back towards their roots in tone and storytelling. James Gunn's upcoming Superman film, for instance, is drawing heavily from Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman, which embraces a more optimistic, mythic version of the character. Similar, Fantastic Four First Steps appears to be leaning into a retro, futuristic tone, more in line with the classic spirit of the comics. But Christopher Nolan and all the creatives on Batman Begins were the catalyst for comic book movies today. Batman Begins has aged like fine wine, still rewatchable, still referred to when not just making another comic book movie, but any movie. And today, Nolan is one of the most innovative and daring storytellers. I think Batman Begins will continue to influence how comic book movies and general movies are made for many, many years. And to kind of wrap up the video, I know a lot of people talk about The Dark Knight being the catalyst for everything comic book movies going forward and how we make films and storytelling. But it was in fact Batman Begins, and I think it's so underrated, the film. I feel like people skip it too much. And if you go back and watch it now, like I said, it's aged really well and the storytelling is really impactful. But Nolan's trying to play with grounded reality with fantasy a little bit. But then when you come to The Dark Knight, the sort of weights shift and it's way more grounded. This is Nolan's sandbox. He's playing. And Batman Begins is a great film to refer to when creating a comic book movie. It really is. It's very innovative. It's very different from Batman and Robin and the Burton films. It's very, very different. And I think Batman Begins gets overlooked way too much. Way too much. Well, that was 20 years of Batman Begins, and I can't see a thing in this. So happy birthday to Batman Begins. 20 years ago, I still remember going to see it in the cinema. That's how old I am, kids. I saw it in a cinema. And again, it's one of my favorite comic book movies, if not one of my favorite movies in my very long list of favorite movies. To this day, I still can't stop buying the merchandise. What did you think of my thoughts? I know they're nothing new, but I think celebrating 20 years of Batman, it's important to bring that topic back up. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts on my thoughts and the film overall, and make sure you like the video for more videos like this. It's a bit different, but like it, and there might be more videos like this, and subscribe to the channel. It really, really helps me out. Anyway, take care, and remember, I'm Batman.